Okay, so here we are finishing up chapter 15. So we are going to be looking at Indian Ocean trade and expansion of religions into Southeast Asia. So we're going to have two essential questions here. So we're going to kind of split that in half, describing the Indian Ocean trade system, innovation and technologies that allowed the trade to expand, and the effects that it had on the region, as well as going into Southeast Asia. So they're going to be kind of expanding that with how the Indian Ocean trade led to territorial conflicts in Southeast Asia and the expansion of the religious beliefs and syncretism as well as political beliefs within that part of the world. So we're not going to go into a whole lot of depth here, okay, because the textbook can do that a lot better than I can. So we're going to just kind of look at kind of the big overlaying ideas going into in the spread of the Indian Ocean trade system as well as into Southeast Asia. So our location within the Indian Ocean area, okay, you can kind of see going into the Bay of Bengal, Arabian Sea, Red Sea, kind of all the way down here, connects kind of a sea Silk Road or the maritime Silk Road. Because we know that the Silk Road kind of runs throughout China, into Mongolia, Afghanistan, northern India, all the way into the Middle East and into the Mediterranean. This is a different strategy that becomes more valuable over time. Because remember what we said when we talked about the initial successes of the Silk Road was the fact that it was cheaper over time because you had to stop in all these different ports and you had to continually change hands. And I mean, you're doing that anyway within these ships too, or within these port cities. But it was cheaper to do it over land than over sea back in the day. And part of that had to do with this, and that is monsoons. Okay, and I didn't realize I put it so far down. So we'll cover that in a second. We'll talk about the monsoons. So this helps grow India's prosperity because it's literally squashed in the middle of China, but also in the middle of trade from the other side within the Middle East, within Muslim trading and Arab trading, also East Africa as well as Europe. So the goods have to somehow flow kind of either right north of India or through India along the Indian Ocean trade basin within the Indian Ocean. So what's aided this is new ships. Okay, in this case we have the Chinese Dhow ships and Indian and Muslim, Chinese junk ships. Junk is the actual name of the ship. And then the Indian and Muslim Dhow ships that use the lateen sail that make sure that you don't have to use oars anymore. So again, these ships are faster. They can carry more goods. They're easier to manage, and they can get further away from the coastlines than previous ships could. So these are factors that kind of allow for the expansion of this trade in the ocean and become more viable than just going over roads. And again, this expands over time. It's not like an overnight thing. So one of the things to really consider, though, is the fact that, as we said within the monsoons within the previous video talking about trade and agricultural production within India and how it relies on that, the monsoon winds are also really important in terms of understanding the trade inside of the ocean, because the monsoon winds essentially only go one direction for 6 months out of the year and go the other direction the other 6 months. So you can kind of see November to February and then April to September going in opposite directions, and they also kind of go the same time period going during the other ways too. All right, and even though I couldn't find a copy of the exact map in the book does also show the other directions from the eastern side of India, going from Sumatra, Indonesia, would now be, Malaya, Singapore, all those places. All right, so monsoon winds allow for safe travel in one direction for half the year. The other half of the year, however, it made it very dangerous to try and go the opposite direction. So April and September monsoons, if you're coming from East Africa to the west coast of India, very, very safe, especially if you're going along the coastline. However, if you're trying to go the opposite direction, even along the coast during that same time of year, it can end up being disastrous because of the strong headwinds. You're going in the opposite direction, so it's not a safe thing. So that means that traders have to spend several months in certain ports as a result to not being able to move their goods unless they want to move it over land, but that might mean less money for them. So what they end up doing is you end up building warehouses, and you find these little enclaves and diasporic communities of traders of all different backgrounds. So Jewish traders, Christian, Chinese, within Buddhism, Taoist traders a little bit. You're only going to find a whole lot of Taoists who are really big on trade. But Muslim traders as well, all stopping in at these various ports along all these places, particularly here in India within the middle. All right, but you also begin to see that expansion of missionaries and religious people along these routes too, to help, again, spread religion. Again, think Sufi mystics spreading Islam. All right, but they're not the only ones. They're just kind of the biggest ones. So you find in places like Calicut, in Cambay, Quilon, and then all these other places like Malacca, and then along these other places, just really large enclaves of, different cultural traders and peoples that are kind of mixing in the trade. They have to know the landscape. They have to retain their own culture while adapting to the other forms of culture that are around them and other languages and tradition and trading practices in order to ensure that the trade is successful between these various groups. So this leads to intermarriage, as we mentioned in the last video, between Muslims and Indian people, but also within other groups as well. And we begin to see syncretism between the various religions based on who is trading with who is working with who's marrying who, all right, as that kind of continues within these areas, all right? So the Muslims, obviously, because we know that at this point, North Africa and the Middle East, going to Persia and Afghanistan and northern India, is essentially dominated, at least politically, by Muslims. Off to the east, you have even to the south and to the east, you are primarily dealing with Hindus, and then Buddhists controlling that trade going in the opposite direction. So due to that increased trade, regions are becoming more specialized in what they are providing and selling, okay? Because if one group is, providing porcelain, but another group can make paper or gunpowder, it doesn't make sense that they try and compete with each other on that rather than, saying, oh, well, my gunpowder is just as good as his gunpowder. Instead, what they do is, we're going to focus on this thing that we can specialize in to make a whole lot of money on, rather than try and compete with that group over there or that society or country or empire. And we know that they can make it much more efficiently than we can, but we can make these things more efficiently than they can. And so you begin to find, balance of power within trade. So one group is specializing in just one area, or not one area, but certain areas where they are really good and can make a lot more money, as opposed to other areas that may not necessarily have those resources to make the same goods or make them as efficiently. This also includes foods. And again, we're not going to give examples of that here. The book lays that out pretty well, and you can just kind of easily Google that stuff too. So hopefully that kind of gives the idea for why India is at the center point of this, but also the importance of, again, that technology and the monsoon winds within that, and how this kind of clashes and also combines all these religions and cultural traditions in one spot. So you do find very large numbers of Muslims, Buddhists, and everybody else inside of these areas. And that's going to be something we're going to come back to when we start talking about when the Europeans begin to around the Horn of Africa around the year 1500, around the same time Columbus is off going towards the Americas. And that's going to be really, really big. We're going to have a lot more in-depth look at that, several chapters from now. So keep that in the back of your mind going beyond this chapter, because it is something we're going to look at. This is just as important of the Silk Roads. So not really going to talk about this here, but it's in there. So yeah, within Southeast Asia, okay, we have Indian traders that begin to explore and go into Southeast Asia. So these places, primarily, Vietnam, Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, up here. What is Myanmar up here? Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, leading to the diffusion of initially Hinduism and Indian political organizations. So people begin to take on a lot of Indian beliefs within the systems and begin to take on Hinduism because they find that there's a lot of use out of that for their political life, and thinking that this is a way for them to retain and control power as well as good trading ties. However, one thing that they do not take on from Indian culture is the caste system. All right. And mind you, this again starts off at the top, as we see with many of the religious diffusion, begins with a lot of the leaders within that, not necessarily people at the bottom. And they're also using syncretism within their local beliefs. So what you see is a lot of people taking on, Hinduism and building Hindu temples, but also still believing spiritually within their own local backgrounds and, gods and deities and practices that they were practicing before the arrival of Hinduism. And then later on, Buddhism coming down from China and then through Vietnam finds its way into Indonesia, as does Islam, again, via our Indian Ocean trade. And again, the rulers are ready and willing to accept these things for the protection that it gives them, the trading influence that it provides, but also because it reinforces rules of a king, a monarch. All right, so it aids in building their wealth, but at the same time, as in many of these cases, just like we saw Islam in India, they don't force their religious beliefs on people. It's kind of more slowly done over time. Again, role of the Sufi mystics. There's another reading on that, kind of playing in there. And so syncretism becomes really, really essential. And you have, even today, people in India and Indonesia and in other places scattered throughout Southeast Asia where Islam is really, really big, but it's not exactly the most purest form of it. You find a lot of it still with more local spiritual beliefs within syncretism. So that's kind of our brief mention of that. I'm going to quickly throw this out here. Again, more info in the book. That various Southeastern Asian kingdoms rise and fall, trying to dominate the regional trade and earn money through taxing the trade and areas they control by having strong navies, particularly Malacca, right here kind of in the area just above where Singapore is. And yeah, that's kind of where we're going to finish ourselves today. That kind of covers chapter 15. Again, we'll talk about some more of this stuff more specifically in class and we'll look at examples, but hopefully you kind of understand how the trade is central in India and how that leads to, again, the spread of but not only Hindu beliefs and Indian political beliefs into Southeast Asia, but also Buddhism and Islam into these areas as well. Again, primarily you start off with the leaders, but then also the trade and the missionaries come in with it. And, you know, there are other reasons why people are willing to convert. So that's where we're going to pause it. Otherwise, if you got questions, as always, definitely feel free to ask, and we'll cover it in class if we can. So we're going to pause it there.